A guest with a negative experience spending 5 times more money with you. It's worth 24 times your average guest.
Zack Oates is the founder of Ovation, helping restaurants turn guest feedback into growth.
Nowadays, you can't open up a restaurant and do well with okay food. You've got to have great food, but the food is going to be the food. It's about how do they feel about it. I'll meet these grandmas that are their GMs. They treat everyone like their grandkid. When you have someone like that, it's like people feel good. They want to come in there.
What's kind of the single most consistent difference you've seen between operators who are like really thriving and maybe ones who are struggling?
Do they start with the guest? If you want to know what's the bellwether of your guest experience, look at your employees. If your team feels engaged and happy, then yeah, that trickles down. If they don't, then yeah, that also trickles down.
What is something that you believe about customer experience that you did not believe 5 years ago, and what changed your mind?
I never believed that AI could replace human workflows with the guest. After seeing the data, they absolutely can.
Zack Oates, welcome to the Restaurant Reset. Thank you so much for being here. A restaurant podcast legend. I feel like a child when it comes to restaurant podcasts, and you are an expert in this field. So I'm honored to have you on, man.
I look up to the likes of like the Bruce Irvings out there, and I think Chip Close does a really good one. Who else? Oh, Eric Cacciatore, obviously. He's like in the thousands of podcasts. Matt Plapp, I mean, he's got some amazing content. Anyway, I feel like we are living someone's dream, right?
Right. I think it was Karen Stutz on that, and she was just like, "Oh, you'll have Zack on. Oh, Zack's great."
Oh, she's awesome.
Yeah, I've been excited to chat with you. I know it's been a long time coming. I kind of want to start somewhere a little bit unexpected, right? You grew up in restaurants, as do many of us. You went and got your MBA. You won the world's largest student startup competition with a child safety wristband company and rang the NASDAQ bell. And then you also, very publicly, you talked about going on 1,000 dates before you got married, which is all those on paper, like those 4 things seem completely like separate chapters of a life, but somehow they all funneled into building Ovation. So take me back. Where does that story actually start for you? And when did you all realize that all these different things were kind of pointing at the same thing?
Yeah, so I love traveling. I've been to over 50 countries. I love getting out there. I love learning about new cultures. I love, meeting new people and understanding what it is that makes them tick. And one of the things I realized is as I was traveling, there were so many restaurants I ate at that I was like, oh my gosh, this place is great. I wish that other people can find this. And these restaurants and quite frankly, like businesses overseas live or die based on their TripAdvisor reviews.
Yeah.
And I was like, I wish there was a way that they can remind me to leave a review or like see what my experience was like so they could improve it for the next people. And it just like it never happened. There was never like that simple survey that went out. Sometimes I'd get like, hey, answer our half-hour survey. And I'm like, I'm just not going to do that.
Yeah, no one's going to have that time.
No one's going to do that. And so I came back from that and I was like, man, wouldn't that be great if there was a way that businesses here can just easily collect feedback? And so how it started was actually just an iPad app. And we built an iPad app with just a survey tool, and it would just go by the exit. And as people were leaving, they can just rate their experience and then leave their contact information and get follow-up messages. And that's how it started. And it was just supposed to be like a little side hustle. And then it started growing and growing and growing. And more people were using it. They were telling their friends about it. I remember our very first customer, we had just launched a prototype that day. Like in the App Store, for those who don't know, there's actually like a way that you can pre-release an app so you can use it on an iPad. And you need like a developer account, and it's
on Test Flight.
Yeah, exactly. So I had the Test Flight app, and one of my buddies came over who owned some restaurants, and I was like, "Oh, hey, we just launched this today," and I was like, "I'd love to get your feedback." But he was just coming over because he was a homie, and he was like, "Dude, I need that tomorrow," and I was like, "Oh, it's just a test app," and he was like, "Can I get an account so I could use it?" And so he went out the next day, bought an iPad, downloaded the test flight account. We gave him access to it, and he started using it that day and started giving us feedback like every day about what he loved, what he wanted to see. And it was really cool because he was like, "This is incredible. This is exactly what I need." And so we were like, "Okay, maybe we're onto something.
Yeah.
Maybe we should go full time and like, as opposed to just this part-time side hustle." And so that's what happened. We quit my job, and because at that point I was doing consulting because I wanted to see if I could be happy just like having a job,
Yeah.
and it didn't quite fit the bill for me, and that's okay. But I quit that and started full time on Ovation, and it's just been a wild and incredible ride these last coming up on full time over 8 years.
That's a fun story. I think, some of the best kind of startup stories are the ones that are maybe like a lot of them, a lot of good idea companies that come out are born out of a frustration. Like someone has some kind of a frustration and then they're like, I'm going to go off and I've now created Airbnb or Uber or, a Boeing even. Like, I mean, a bunch of these like founders, even if you go back to their stories, they were created out of a frustration or just an everyday finding that they went, wait a second, hold on. Like that seems like something that could be done better. Maybe it's
Yeah,
maybe it's
yeah.
me. Right? I kind of got an idea. There was a bunch of stuff that I kind of listed off at the start because I think it's just you have such a great like Hemingway life that is fun there yeah, as a founder. But I want to dive into one to start with. Before we go deep on the Ovation stuff, I want to understand like the thousand dates comment, and that comes from the fact that your book is called "Dating Never Works Until It Does," and you actually built a framework for this, like before the date, on the date, after the date. And at some point in those 1,000 dates, you started seeing patterns about what makes someone decide that, hey, I want to see you again. When did you realize that some of those patterns were basically kind of an operating manual for how restaurants should treat their guests? Because I think
Oh,
that's a
yeah.
really interesting analogy that once you peel it back, you're like, that makes so much sense.
I actually do a keynote presentation called "Dating Your Customers," and we go through this process of the things that make for a great first date or the things that make for a great guest experience. Like, when if I say, "Hey, Andy, I'm gonna set you up with someone," first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna go look them up online, and you're gonna go see, what do they look like? What does it look like they wanna do? What does it look like they like to do? Do they have a family? Are they like dogs or, all these things. And that's what guests are doing with us, is with every restaurant they look at, they're gonna look you up online, and they're gonna say, "Hey, does this look like a place where I can have a good meal?" Um, and then if you go through, like, the things that how do you make them feel special? How do you make them feel seen? How do you make sure that you're building a relationship with them where they wanna give you their contact data? They want you to reach out to them and invite them back, right? All of these things are the same principles of a great first date. And I think at the end of the day, it's about that connection because we talk a lot about it at Ovation about how it starts with the convenience, which is, hey, does this look like a place that is worth my effort to go to have the experience?
Right.
And then so they go in, they try it out, and then it's up to ops. It's marketing that brings them in, and then ops is gonna bring them back through consistency. And if I have a good experience and, I go on a first date and it's good, and so I go on a second date and it's good.
I've delivered on that dating profile, if you will. Yeah.
Exactly, right? Like, I didn't feel like I was catfished or anything. I showed up and it was what I expected, and yeah, I had a good time. Then I'll go on another one. Now, if on that second or third date all of a sudden they have a super off day and like they're rude and they're late and not opening the door and not asking questions, then that inconsistency is why I'm not going to go on the
Yeah.
fourth date, right? And so that's why it starts off with the convenience, then it goes to the connect, then it goes to the consistency, convenience, consistency, and then the top layer is about connection. Because let's say that we've been on 7 dates and all 7 dates have been great. And then the 8th date, maybe they act a little bit weird and you're like, they act grumpy and they're kind of rude. I'm going to say, "Hey, what's going on?" And they say, "You know what? I am so sorry. I'm going through this thing in my life and this is what's happening. And I should have been more respectful. And I'm sorry." Right? then your relationship is actually going to be stronger because you asked about how their experience was. They gave you feedback and you built some context to it and apologized. And then as long as you make better, and that's not you just showing off who you really are, but it's actually just a bad day, then yeah, there's going to be a next date and there's going to be a deeper connection and there's going to be more likelihood of a relationship. And so I think that just, realizing that whether it's a date or a steak, humans are humans, right? And people want to feel important. They want to feel like they matter, and they want to feel like there's something there that's going to help them to have their lives be better, right? And so once you realize that like everything we deal with from business to restaurants to dating, humans and humans, there's a lot of patterns that start to emerge.
Yeah, and I think, it's amazing how, we in the, even in the tech space, even in like the business space, we can get hung up on KPIs and we can get hung up on, all these, metrics that we want to dive in on. And those are some good numbers that tell actual stories of real things. It's kind of important to remember that people make decisions based on how they're feeling and on whether they're interested and may continue to be interested. And as a restaurant operator, because the people who kind of listen to this show are anyone from your little mom and pops just getting started to open up a restaurant all the way up to folks who work at very large enterprise brands of like thousands of stores. But regardless of which end of the spectrum you're on, really, you have to understand that it is kind of like a date with that customer, and you need to present yourself in all of those facets well if you're going to have a good customer journey. And if you lack on any of those, like, you could have great marketing and you show up and your ops is terrible, you're never going to get the continued date. And if you have good ops, you have good marketing, but you're not following up through on all of the engagement with that guest, guess what? There's a lot of other fish in the sea. There are a lot of other restaurants you can eat at, and people have limited time, and they don't want to waste their time on someone who's not going to do well for them. And think, you would probably agree with this, that the people who do well in all three of those categories are the ones who see the most, guest value out of people. Would you say that's right?
Oh yeah, and not only that, but I mean, they care. And if you're going to care about the individuals, then things are going to work out because obviously nowadays you can't open up a restaurant and do well with okay food. You've got to have great food. But the food is going to be the food. It's about how do they feel about it, right? Like look at Swig. Why does Swig crush it? I mean, anyone can go and get a can of Dr. Pepper. Anyone could go and get some syrups at any of the grocery stores and can get any coffee creamers
Yeah.
and put it together. So why are they doing thousands and thousands of transactions a month? Why are they blowing up? Why are their AUVs crazy? Why? Because they care. Because they look at each individual guest as someone who's important to them, not just as, hey, let's just like churn and burn, pump you through. But they care about their guests. And I think that shows through from the founder to the the mixologist there at each store.
Yeah, I've talked a lot with the all the guys and gals from Swig, and it just comes through when you chat with them that they really care about their guests. Like, the reason they love the line buster flow out in the drive-through is so that they can talk with people as they're taking their orders and have that person to person connection. And a lot of people like just eat that up as a guest. We're like, yeah, I will go back there. Yeah, you're right. Anyway, take a Dr. Pepper, pour some vanilla creamer in it, and call it a day. But when it's marketed well, it's delivered well, and then there's that connection as part of it. It just is so easy for the customer to be like, "Yeah, I'll pay a couple bucks to go get a soda from Swig versus make my own."
Yeah, exactly.
I think one of the big things, though, when you give your talks, there's always this number that I think you reference, which is probably a jarring moment for people who are listening to these discussions, and that is that only 30% of guests come back to a restaurant after visiting the first time. That's really crazy. I mean, 70% of everyone who walked through your door in the last week is probably never coming back to your restaurant. And most operators, you kind of say, have no idea about that. What's the reaction? Because you speak a lot, right? What's the reaction you get from a room full of restaurant operators when you put that number on the screen and dive into that? What's kind of the reaction you get?
It's interesting. The bigger the brands get, the less shocked they are about it.
Right, because they've got teams running data analytics.
Yeah, right? The smaller the teams get, the more, contentious they get, because 'cause they're like, "No, I know my people. I know my customers, and that is not the case." And I'm like, "Look, you know your customers, you know the guests that are coming in a lot, and they take up the majority of your time when you're walking around the restaurant, but at the end of the day, that's not your average guest. You're spending 80% of your time with your top 5% of your customers. Like, that's a different story." But and the truth of the matter is, it's really, if you look at the brand, it ranges between about 20 to 50%, right? And the reason why is because there's certain brands, like if you are like a pizza place, there's a very high reorder rate of like a chain pizza restaurant.
Right.
If you're a fast casual in New York City, your rate's gonna be much lower because, there's like something like there's as many restaurants in New York as there are in Canada, right? Like, it's just
Yeah.
bananas, you know? And so there's just so many options and things are expensive, so people are gonna try that. Now, what we find though is here's what's really interesting. The guest who has a negative the average guest, when you compare it to a guest who had an amazing experience, right? They take the Ovation survey and they love it. I'm actually gonna start reading some data for you.
All right. I love this.
Okay. The guest who has a great experience is gonna spend twice as much with you in a given year than the average guest. So if you get someone just to share their experience with you, they're giving you their data, they're possibly leaving you an online review because they're actually 9 times more likely to leave you a positive review than your average guest. Get those guests to engage, and that little bit of engagement, it feels weird, but it's like asking your neighbor to come help you with yard work.
Yeah.
If you're going to build a better relationship with them, if you get a guest to take a survey, they will innately become more loyal. They will think about you
Mhm.
more often. They will come in more often. Their return rate is higher. They actually spend more money per visit. It's not a lot, but they come in more often, which means they're going to be spending on average twice as much in a given year. That's, again, not looking at the online review portion of things. Now, if the guest had a negative experience,
Mhm.
something goes wrong, and you do not have a mechanism to recover them, or you choose not to utilize that mechanism for whatever reason,
Right.
they are worth 30% of your average guest. So they will spend 30% of what your average guest spends in a year. So if
Right.
you look at that visit and then the next 12 months, what do they spend? They're spending a third of what the
Yeah. Not a lot.
no, not a lot, right? And so you look at that guest, and that, by the way, is in a very high, that is looking at the highest retention rate type of businesses. So it goes down from there. While it's like 30%, in some businesses that becomes 11%.
Yeah. That's when you have a problem and you don't recover that
You
guest.
have a problem and you don't recover them, you don't have the mechanism to catch them, and that upset guest, that lapsed guest is, by the way, a lot more likely to leave you a negative review. In fact, they're 3 times more likely to leave you a negative review.
Which hurts your Tinder profile in
Yeah,
the
exactly, right?
right? What about the flip side, though?
Okay, now let's get to that 4th category. So you have your average, you have your, I had a great experience, you had negative experience with no recovery. Now, what happens if you have a negative experience with proper service recovery? This is something that they've had PhD papers written about this. It's called the service recovery paradox, where a guest with a negative experience in proper service recovery is going to be more loyal than if the guest never has the failure in the first place.
Mm.
And here's the numbers to back it up. Again, I'm looking at the very highest frequency. So the numbers here are going to be the least shocking compared to the lowest frequency type of restaurants. So they come in 3 times more frequently than your average guest, right? Their recency, right? If you look at how soon they come back in between visits, that's again 3.5 times sooner. And if you look at their spend, they're actually spending $4 to $5 more per visit. And
Mhm.
we've done that analysis on how much they spend per visit across the spectrum from high frequency to low frequency, and that $4 to $5 tends to hold true. So they're spending more money, they're coming in more often, which means in a given year, they're spending 5 times more money with you. That's not including who do they think about with catering. They're 12 times more likely to leave you a positive review. They're not going to leave you that negative review. So those guests are worth, if you look at like the total value of a recovered unhappy guest, it's worth 24 times your average guest. But if you look at, take out all the fluff of the reviews and this and that, if
Yeah.
you just look at the dollars, they're spending 5 times more with you. So what that leads me to believe, Andy, is that like you have got to have that mechanism to that safety net to make sure that you get the most amount of people possible telling you about their experience that'll help you with your operations, and it'll give you these opportunities to recover that guest.
That's fantastic. You totally kind of led me to where one of the places I was going was. It sounds like that type of guest ultimately becomes the most valuable guest from a metric perspective.
Oh my gosh. There is not a single demographic of guests that are going to be more valuable to your restaurant than a recovered guest who had a negative experience.
Cool.
And the amazing thing is that we found that our AI is actually 10% better at recovering that guest than humans.
I've heard that a bunch, that like AI is like way even better at that.
Yeah, because I mean, if you come into my store, Andy, and you just like rip me a new one, and you're just like, "Rah, rah, 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 I'm like so mad about this, and you messed up this, and you messed up that," I could come back to you hot and just be like,
Yeah.
"That's not what happened, Andy," or I can come back to you being like, "Thanks," right? But AI is trained on the voice of the brand. They know what you've ordered. They know how, we know how valuable you are, and so creating that experience with you to say, Andy, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. This is what happened. We're gonna try to do better. I really appreciate you giving me that feedback. By the way, here's $10 off your next order if
Mhm.
you're willing to give us another shot. And like those are the types of things that make people say, "Wow, I trust this brand."
Yeah, I'm glad you highlighted that, because that was the question I was going to get to. Was, okay, this person sounds like the most valuable person to my business as a restaurant person, is to be able to recover a guest that had a bad experience. I hear all those numbers. That sounds great. I want more of that. But the next thing that someone who's listening to this is thinking of was like, how do I do that? And you kind of highlighted a couple things there, like, some people, especially if you're a chef, a chef owner, right? You take someone who's critical of your food personally. It's hard not to, because food is such a personal and emotional thing. You might get a negative review or a complaint, and you might just go on the defensive. You might come in hot. You also mentioned kind of things like, offering a discount, or maybe just be like, whatever, they can kick rocks. But what does an actual good guest recovery look like from start to finish? You kind of started to touch on a couple of those points, which, like, maybe acknowledging the problem. Don't try to, like, blame shift or anything. Take ownership and maybe see if there's a way you could get them back in the door with a discount. I don't know. Walk me through what, to you as the expert here, what does a good or even perfect guest recovery look like?
I think that obviously you could look up. I mean, there's the anatomy of the guest recovery where you acknowledge, you find some way to apologize, you can connect with that guest. Make sure, here's some secret. Here's like always, always, always make sure to use their specific name and use your name.
Mm.
It's not just like you know, uh, hey, sorry that Zach was rude. Will be better. Right? It's like, make it personal, make it to Andy, make it from Zach. The other thing is, if it's something that's like really egregious, a lot of times bad AI will repeat that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I found a cockroach in my food. Responding back, Andy, I'm so sorry you found a cockroach in your food.
Thanks for reminding me,
Yeah, right,
AI.
exactly. It's about how do you soften that blow. Now, if it's a smaller thing, like I waited 20 minutes, you have to acknowledge that. I'm
Mhm.
so sorry that you waited 20 minutes. If it's a bigger thing, you want to be able to, you want to couch it in terms of an apology. And our AI has been trained on how to do that, and it's very smart with that. But there is that balance there of re-angering the customer, but also acknowledging their specific feedback. Here's what I would say though. There's a bunch of things we could talk about with the anatomy of that response, and always making sure that if they don't make them ask for a refund,
Mhm.
if they deserve a refund, um, don't just, throw out there a coupon and be like, here you go. Now we're even. Like,
Yeah.
it's like always couch it in terms of hospitality. But here's what I would say. The principle is, how often is that person complaining and how valuable is that guest to you? That's what's more important, because if it's your first time in and you complain, I want to go above and beyond. I
Right.
want to make sure that you know that I am here for you. Now, if it's their second time complaining in a row, then yeah, I still want to acknowledge and maybe I give them a free soda. If it's their third or fourth time complaining, it's fine to just apologize. But after that, look, it's not going to be a good fit.
Yeah. Maybe we should just not see each other anymore.
I've had restaurants respond back saying, I'm happy to offer you a coupon to a competitor down the street. We obviously are not hitting the mark for you. So those are the types of things where it's like, don't treat everyone. And this is what the instinct is. I'm going to treat this person like this is their sixth time complaining in a row.
Okay.
If you look at the average, say 100 people come into your restaurant and complain. Data shows maybe one or two of them are trying to take advantage of you. So why are you treating the other 99, 98 as if they're in that fraction of a group? If you treat them like, I'm going to go above and beyond the first time, but here's the benefit of like having a system to track that feedback. I'm going to go above and beyond the first time. I'm going to make it right the second time. I'll apologize the third time. I'll maybe acknowledge it the fourth time, right? But like, uh, you need to look at that and say, is this a loud customer that doesn't like the way that we do business?
Mhm.
Or is there a systemic problem that we keep on messing up?
Yeah, you don't wanna trick yourself into thinking like, "Oh, we don't have a problem, it's on them. Oh, they just are a complaining customer," and then you go and find out, "Hey, this store in St. George is really, neglecting some serious things. We actually have a problem here." Well, actually, that's a good question. How do you distinguish between that and find, like, signal there and not noise? Like, how do you parse that?
That's the beauty of collecting a lot of feedback. So if I get a little bit of feedback from a lot of guests, that's going to tell me an accurate depiction of what's actually happening in the restaurants, as opposed to getting a lot of information from just a couple of people.
Mhm.
That's really tough to distinguish noise from the actual signal. And so that's what I look at in terms of the volume and the severity and who's giving that feedback. Because if there's one person giving a lot of feedback, that should show up differently than if a lot of people are giving the same feedback. And so that's how we distinguish it. And we look at, and we're not just looking at the feedback from Ovation. We're pulling in third party reviews, like from DoorDash, from Google, from these online review sites. And we're trying to understand what is the complete picture of the feedback. We're pulling in feedback. We have we collect feedback from the website, right? And so it's like we just look everywhere we possibly can that the guests might give feedback, and we try to be there and we try to show up for them in the least friction way possible. So the most frictionless way possible, to put another way, because we want to maximize how many people are coming in, because that will give you the clearest indication of what you need to fix. And our AI, by the way, will read through all of that and recommend at every single location exactly what they need to work on for that week or that month. And then on the flip side, it's about the service recovery, right? So if you're getting the data to improve operations and you're saving the one-to-one guest, then you're able to make it right now and fix it forever. And those are the two things that create true consistency and connection. And if you don't have those two things, what do you have? I mean, look at Chick-fil-A, right? When was the last time you went into Chick-fil-A and you had a 3-star experience?
Yeah. It's pretty incredibly consistent and always very friendly.
Exactly, right? I mean, you go to a Chick-fil-A and you're getting a 4, on a bad day, 5 on, and by the way, 5 stars in restaurants is like, yeah, I'm like meeting expectations, right?
Right.
So I think that's the beauty of what we're doing, and when you could look at that and you can say, "Hey, here is what we're doing to improve our operations and consistently trying to improve," that's how you build generational brands. And that's how you build that, that legacy as opposed to, "Hey, yeah, we're just trying to pump out this burger real quick," right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's true. I know five stars is like, it is hard to get when you look at the review sites. I have a very strict, like, I have like a 4 stars floor. Like, it's got to be somewhere with a 4 in the front of it for me to be like, all right, we're gonna spend some time to go here to a place I've never been before.
Yeah, and it's gotta be 4 stars. If there's anything if there's any restaurant that's under 4 stars, here's what happens. I look for best burgers near me.
Yeah,
Google will automatically filter out anyone below 4 stars.
right. That's right.
If you don't have 4 stars, like, you don't exist.
You gotta get that together. That's like a high priority.
Exactly. But that's the thing is, like, you could go into a place and have it might not be mind blowing, but that's the beauty about a 5-star experience is I had a 5-star experience because I got what I paid for. That in the restaurant industry is the standard of 5 stars, which is why at Chick-fil-A, I genuinely cannot think of a single 4-star experience I've had at Chick-fil-A. They happen, I'm sure, but I know that if anything goes wrong, they will fix it right away and they will be happy. It'll be their pleasure to fix it.
Yeah, and it will always go well for you. It's one of those things you can feel confident in. I love that. Hey, so there's an analogy that you've used and a really good counterintuitive idea kind of in your world of guest experience that, the first time I read it, I was like, oh, that's a really interesting way of thinking about things. Is that guest experience is a leading indicator of profit and not a lagging indicator, which to me, I was like, I never really thought about that. That's an interesting idea. And I think that's also probably opposite of how most operators are trained to think. And you kind of used analogy where it's really more kind of like the Apple weather app in that the current temperature is your P&L. And then the 5-day forecast, which we all look at to see is it going to rain at my son's baseball game on Friday, is like the 5-day forecast is the guest experience and your guest experience metrics and scores. How do you go about helping an operator who maybe has been in the weeds for like 20 years actually sit with that idea and change how they run their week? Like how do you get to talk to someone about that? Because it's so flip side of what most people think about at first.
Totally. The thing that we always say is your P&L tells you where you're at. Your guest experience will tell you where you're going. And the reason for that is if you think about you get a new GM and let's just say operationally that GM does everything exactly like your previous GM except this GM is great at table touches. They go out there and they
Mhm.
learn people's names. They talk to the guests as they walk in. They remember orders. They encourage the staff, right? What's going to happen to the retention of that location? Operations being exactly the same, the guests are gonna wanna come back more often,
Mm.
right? Because I remember one of my friends told me about 2 coffee shops.
Right.
There was one that was closer that was great and farther that was good,
Right.
right? And so I was like, "Well, obviously, the one that's closer and great, closer and better, yeah, you probably went to that one." And she goes, "No, I went to the one where they knew my name." And that,
Mhm.
like, shift really kinda tells the story of what we're talking about here, which is it's about that, it's about that connection that's going to determine what happens with revenue and profitability, which is why we did a study with a very large, brand, same city. They had a couple of area managers, same franchisee, and they picked equal stores that and they kinda split the city in half.
Yeah.
At the end of 4 months, the stores that were using Ovation had 9% more revenue than the stores not using Ovation. And it's not because they did anything different other than they showed the guests that they cared, they recovered them, and they were listening. And if the guests feel like you're listening, they're much more likely to come back because they know that there's that avenue to connect with you. And so that's really why we look at that guest experience. And if you switch to GM and guest experience nosedives, you look at what's going to happen in 3 to 4 months. Your
Mhm.
profitability and your revenue will also nosedive. It is it is the bellwether of profitability. And if you want to, by the way, one click before that, if you want to know what's the bellwether of your guest experience, look at your employees. Are they happy? Are they satisfied? Are the GMs treating them well? Because the guest experience can't exceed the employee experience. And so if your team feels engaged and happy, then yeah, like that trickles down. If they don't, then yeah, that also trickles down. But that guest experience, sometimes the ENPS could be a little bit tough to measure,
Yeah.
but that guest experience, especially if you're collecting a lot of data, is going to be, you're going to have a really clear indication and trend of what's happening. And you can compare different stores to see, is it good, is it not good, and what do you need to fix?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you put employee satisfaction as a leading indicator before guest satisfaction, which is a leading indicator of profit. That is a really interesting chain of events too, because sometimes people are just thinking about the guests, it's all about the customer, all about the guests, but you don't realize, like, oh my gosh, if my people aren't happy, well, they're probably not going to do a good job at serving the guest, right? And so that's a good reframing that I didn't even expect you to go there with. That's really helpful.
Yeah, and it's something that we see time and time again of like, again, like that GM is the most important person in the restaurant industry.
Hmm.
And because you could set all the best strategies you can, and there's like great GMs will will create a great restaurant regardless of, all of these other strategies and LTOs and everything like that.
Right.
And you want to look around. I mean, there was, I'll talk to people who will go and visit the most successful franchisees in their systems, and one of the common denominators is there's a GM there that cares.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
I've met a few of them, and and there's actually an interesting trend. The reason I started to chuckle is because, like, this may come across bad, but I'll say it because this is like something that I've seen. It's typically people who are like, well, what I've seen is I'll meet these grandmas that are their GMs, and they treat everyone like their grandkid.
Yeah.
And when you have someone like that treats everyone like their grandkid, it's like people feel good. They want to come in there and, like, talk to the GM, and these people care. Now, obviously, there's all ages and all genders, but if I've seen, like, of the GMs that I've met where someone said they are a rock star, their store is killing it more than others. I've met a handful of them that fall into that category, and I don't know what it is other than the fact of they show that love.
They just make you feel a way.
Yes, everyone can do that, and if they do that, doesn't matter if they're a grandma or not, you could make people feel seen, and people wanna go places where they feel seen.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the things that just comes through talking to you is it's so obvious that you've had so many good discussions with so many people in this industry, and you've hosted Give Innovation podcasts for hundreds and hundreds of episodes, and you've talked to so many different restaurant operators and brands, and I think it would be interesting. You have a really unique perspective across all of that. Like, what's kind of the single most consistent difference you've seen between operators who are like really thriving and maybe ones who are struggling? I mean, I guess I don't know how often you're talking to operators who are struggling per se, but I'm curious what kind of through lines and commonalities you see and insights you can pull from all the hundreds of guests you've talked to when it comes to, you know, what people are doing well and what people aren't.
Great question, 'cause I think about one of the benefits too is that, yeah, there's not a lot of, operators that come on who are, like, struggling and being like, "Oh, my restaurant stinks and I don't know what to do."
Right.
But
Yeah.
I also get to meet a lot of folks at trade shows, and I get to have people on the podcast and have friends like, Rev Ciencio and Sean Walchef who are out there talking with hundreds of restaurant operators as well. So I kind of get when we sit down those late night chats, and I get to hear what are they hearing. The thing that I see is, do they start with the guest?
Mhm.
That's the big difference I found in restaurants that are like trying to turn a profit versus restaurants that are trying to build a brand. Do they start with the guest? Sometimes these PE groups, they come in and everyone knows that a PE group is going to buy a company and
Mhm.
then leverage it, crush it, and the brand like slowly dies. How many times have we seen that story play out? Right? I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens of times with some great brands. And why is that? Because what does PE start with?
Yeah. Private.
Private equity, right? That's what they start with, is their stakeholders are not the guest. But you look at Danny Meyer, what does he start with? What does Will Guidara start with? What does Kevin Bain start with? What do these restaurant operators that have built these incredible brands, what do they start with? Everything starts with the guest.
Mhm.
And so if you think, is this because you always have this balance of there's a discussion on improving profitability and improving the guest experience. Now, at times, they can both be improved with the same thing and both be, not improved, like both be hurt with the same thing.
Right.
But wait, what is the opposite of improved? You improve something and you
You have disimproved it. You have reduced it in effectiveness. You have had it detriment to the improvement.
that is so bizarre. If you lower the profitability and deteriorate the guest experience, you could do that. But there's other things where it's like, I'm going to improve the profitability by changing my beef to a cheaper beef. And if that negatively impacts the guest experience, then great, you saved $1 and you lost 20.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing that the PE is looking at, that like, how do I maximize my profits? Whereas because those best operators are thinking, how do I improve the guest experience? And it might not help me this month, this quarter, but this is going to improve the guest experience. And I know that that is a leading indicator of profits. And 4 or 5 months down the road, this is going to make a difference in my profits.
Yeah, that's really good. I want to end on one final question here. I I'd love to know, what is something that you believe about leadership and customer experience that you did not believe 5 years ago, and what changed your mind? I think that's a really good place to kind of leave it.
I never believed that AI could replace human workflows
Mm.
with the guest. And after seeing the data, they absolutely can. Now, where you can't remove it is like, for example, Swig. You're talking about those line busters.
Yep.
They're going out there, and Dutch Bros does the same thing where they go out there and they are talking to you. I mean, one of my buddies posted a this post on X, and he was like, I think Dutch Bros line would be much faster if it didn't come with a therapy session.
Right.
You
Yeah. It's
know?
like 5 minutes of like, let's unpack your week.
Yeah, exactly,
They
right?
don't care about speed of service for that part.
And I think that that's really the interesting thing about it, is like there are certain things where if it's core to your brand and you need someone to look in the whites of their eyes and, connect with them, AI can't replace that. But there are so many other things that enable people to do that more. And that's what it comes down to, right? How do you allow AI to take those things that will supercharge humans, not replace them,
Yeah.
and
Empower them.
empower them and give them that opportunity to build those individual connections with the guest, because that is key. And 5 years ago, I looked at AI and I thought, this is never really going to touch the restaurant industry
Mhm.
like it has now. And I think it is here to stay. And every single brand should be really considering, what can AI take off of our plate and our
Right.
team's plate and our GM's plate to allow them to fill other plates more. And that's the key of connection.
Yeah, that's great. I completely agree. That's the same view on AI I have, in that it really is meant to augment and empower, and just improve the employees' lives, take some of that stuff off their plate so that they can focus on the stuff that like is that personal, look me in the eyes, have a therapy session at a Dutch Bros while I order, 49 grams of sugar in a massive cup. Right. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's totally it. And that's where this is going. And man, Zack, dude, thank you so much for your time. You are a wealth of information. I know if there's a restaurant operator listening to this, they got value from this hour of us just kind of riffing on this. And your experience is second to none when it comes to this. I'm grateful for the time, and I've loved chatting with you, man. This is fun.
Dude, likewise, Andy. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for the great questions.
Yeah, of course. Restaurant Reset is sponsored by Genius for Restaurants, the modern point-of-sale system from Global Payments. Genius helps you reach your most important goals, whether that's simplifying your operations, speeding up your checkouts and table turns, easily expanding into new locations, or building loyalty with guests. To find out more, visit globalpayments.com/genius.